Hey friend, welcome to Grounded, the vestibular podcast. I'm Dr. Madison Oak, aka the Vertigo Doctor. I am the vestibular physical therapist who is here to help you with all things dizziness, imbalance, and vertigo. In this podcast, we explore the fascinating world of vestibular disorders. Come with me as we dive headfirst into a journey to discover the mysteries of the brain, the inner ear, and the balance mechanisms that keep us grounded. Whether you've been managing dizziness for one day or 25 years, we're going to get real about what it takes to manage dizziness, handle the anxiety cycle, and thrive, not just survive, with your vestibular disorder. First, I want to remind you that this is never medical advice. Remember, this podcast is for informational purposes only and may not be the best fit for you and your personal situation. It shall not be construed as medical advice. The information and education provided here is not intended or implied to supplement or replace professional medical treatment, advice, and/or diagnosis. Always check with your own physician, medical professionals, and healthcare team before trying or implementing any information found here. Meet me in your coziest chair while we navigate the highs and lows, the twists and turns of the vestibular universe. Welcome to Grounded. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Grounded. I'm really excited to have one of my very favoriteest people on today. She has been kind enough to re-record this first half because we had some audio issues. So here we are again. I really appreciate you being here, Stephanie. I would love it if you introduced yourself, kind of told us about yourself, and we can go from there.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Madison. This is such a pleasure to be here, and I always love talking to you. My name is Stephanie B. Looney. I am 51, and I love being 51. I live in Maryland, and I'm a mom of two kids. I was previously working as a physician assistant in internal medicine and then switched to dermatology for a couple of years. I've had migraine with aura since I was about 16, but it was fairly well managed, fairly straightforward, didn't create a lot of issues for me for many years. And then when I turned 40, so that'll be about 11, 12 years now, I had a traumatic incident in New York and just a medical emergency with some choking issues. And that started my journey into 24/7 dizziness, neck pain, nausea, symptoms that'll probably be very familiar to your listeners, and spent about a year and a half getting diagnosed or trying to find a diagnosis for what was going on. So I was eventually diagnosed with vestibular migraine and triple PD. My journey to getting diagnosed was a struggle. And I know I'm saying something that probably a lot of people can relate to. Saw so many doctors, had so many tests, flew this way and that way to try and really understand what was going on. Especially as a PA, I think it was really frustrating because I felt that I had the knowledge to really figure this out and be my own medical detective. However, vestibular migraine and triple PD are extremely difficult to diagnose. It's getting better, I think. However, 11 years ago, it was even more rare. So, as I said, it took me about a year and a half to get diagnosed, and all that time I was symptomatic. So, what I realized was that during that period of time, I was trying to navigate my medical health, also be a mom, husband, working, but also becoming very isolated at the same time. And that is a recipe for even more suffering. And so I realized that between the exhaustion of figuring out my medical issues and trying to get better, trying to find some form of treatment that would work, I just needed help. I needed support, which is really difficult for an A-type personality like myself, who, yep, exactly, hands raised. It was just really, really challenging to admit to myself that I needed to reach out to people and get help. So one of the ways that I realized could be beneficial and I didn't know it was out there was you, Dr. Madison. On social media, I found you, and it was an eye-opening experience. I first became a patient of yours, and we worked together for about maybe a year and a half, maybe
Yeah,
two.
about that.
And then I became a vestibular group fit member, and it still am to this day. And that the relationship that I found, i.e., the community that I found through you, was hugely supportive, both physically because of movement and that piece of the treatment pie, but also mentally, just being able to find community in you and the vestibular group fit community as well was transformational. And I think because we're talking about community today, it just dawned on me throughout this journey and experience how important community is, and whether or not that's in the form of friends or family or a faith community or just people online. That's hugely instrumental in recovery and getting better.
I totally agree with you. And I love what you said about like finding it kind of anywhere. And obviously, in vestibular group fit is a great place to find it. But I also think that like asking, kind of circling back to asking for help, whether it's like asking for help in group from like myself and other members and Dr. Jenna and like all the people of like, hey, what about this treatment? Or what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? To also like, can my partner help me take out the trash? Like, and asking for those small things that seem like so huge and impossible to ask for really do make such a difference, both short term and long term. Because, like, at the end of the day, you probably have some things you have to do every day, right? At some point, you need to feed yourself. At some point, you probably need to take out the trash. At some point, the dog needs to go in the backyard, like, whatever those things are. But you also really, really, really need to ask for help. And the ironic part about all of it is that when someone else asks us for help, I'm like, oh, I would love to. Let me bake you a cookie,
Totally.
make you dinner for the next 2 weeks, drive your kids to school. Let me do all of it. But if it's like, I need help taking out the trash, it's like, I couldn't dare. Don't be crazy. Like,
Totally. Totally. It's that fine line of I want to do it all and I want to do it myself because that makes me feel important and empowered and all the things. But I think our society can prefer that we all do it all ourselves. I mean, that's kind of what we've been taught, especially as women, since we were little girls, which is okay, if you want it all, you got to do it all. And when we ask for help, that's a sign of weakness. I disagree with that strongly. But that's definitely where I was coming from. It was, I felt less than because I couldn't do certain things. And so I was really forced to reach out and ask people for help. But in the end, I'm really grateful for that because I think that's a growth that I've seen in my own personality. And though I, don't like the way that I got there necessarily, I might have picked a different route. But at the end of the day, asking for help and relying on other people is what it's all about, and it's necessary living with this disease process.
it really is. And I'd love to know kind of like the things that you tend to ask for help with, because there are a lot of things you can
Mhm.
do totally independently, right? Like you can, and oh, we
Totally.
last recorded this, you, I read your very, very, very first note, and it was like, I want to be able to drive my son to school, shower, um, a couple of other, I don't remember anymore. It was that was last week, but
Yeah,
all things like you can very easily do now. But at that time, we were like, hey, you have to ask for help doing these other things so you can load the dishwasher. And then once you can load the dishwasher,
correct.
you can go back to doing those things. So what are those things that kind of were most essential for you at the beginning?
So of course at the beginning I wanted it all. I wanted everything to be fixed. I wanted it all to go away, and I wanted to go back to how I felt before I got diagnosed. That's not re reasonable or realistic. And so you helped me break things down into smaller chunks, bite-sized pieces. So some of the things I remember were like you said, showering, that was really challenging for me to put my head back. And I had really long hair at the time, so there was a weight shift, all the proprioception issues that someone with VM or triple PD might experience in the shower. Even just the sensation of the water can create some rocking sensations for me. So what you taught me to do was just pick one thing. Pick one thing like, okay, we're going to work on the shower. We're going to stand a certain way. I remember you telling me to not lean back, but to actually tilt my head back only. And that made a huge difference. So in reality, it was really kind of taking these baby steps and doing one thing at a time, even though I wanted to do it all because I'm an A-type personality. Did I mention that? Um, and I wanted to take on more than I could handle and more than my vestibular system could take. So showering, emptying the dishwasher. I wanted to walk the dog down the street without being highly symptomatic. My dog is large and takes lots of breaks. So we do all the sniffs down the street. So it's a lot of stopping and starting. And I remember that being very challenging for me at the time. You helped me focus on horizon points. And so I wasn't looking down and up and down and up as much during the walk. I would stay forward and not turn towards my dog. So again, though they seem small, like small victories, they were huge because each time I could do something like that, and it may have taken weeks, this is not a like the little fairy dust and, we're all better. At some point, it would get better. And then I would realize, or you would remind me, remember when you couldn't do this and now you can? That adds up over time, and it helped with my self-esteem, helped with my purpose, feeling like, okay, well, at least I can do this. And so yeah, those small things, which I don't think about too much now, several years later, it's always good to think back of how things were and how much progress we've made over time, because it can be hard to see that.
It absolutely can be hard to see that. And I think it's so important to be able to reflect on that. And although I don't want someone to feel like they have to like journal all their symptoms every day and like really hyper focus on them, like maybe writing down like, okay, I'm feeling like I'm at like rock bottom or a place where like I
Yeah,
just ever going to get better. Write that down so that in a year when you do feel better, because again, this gets a lot better. There are no cures. Everyone hates when I say that because people on the internet are going and shouting that there are. But it's important to remember that like these things are manageable, and getting back to a place where you can function is really, really possible. And it does get so much better. And like you
I
can
agree.
are
I
perfect.
agree. Something I thought about after we recorded our first recording, and was that you had asked me about journaling, and I wasn't a huge journaling fan, but perhaps an alternative to that, which I use, and I didn't even realize it until you asked the question, is that a good idea perhaps for people is to go back and look at your notes from your physical therapy visits, for example. I'll use that. I used to take, or, I would take notes when we would meet, and you would send me kind of, some either video clips or suggestions for this and that. And so it is, in fact, almost like a diary or a journal of the time, whether it's 6 months or a year longer. And so that is really helpful too, to go back and say, wow, a year ago, I was having trouble just rolling from left to right in bed. Then it went to, okay, now we're going to work on driving the car. So you can see the progress. It's not linear. I know that's not linear because you love your drawing, and I'm sure you have one nearby, or I could do it. But yep, exactly. up, down, up, down, up, down. So please, don't hear what I'm not saying, which is it did not go from real struggle to perfect solution. It was not that. It's a lot of up and down and dependent on so many things.
Absolutely. And I love what you said. It's not just like fairy dust tomorrow morning, I'm going to be fine. And I think that a lot of people expect to join group or see me one-on-one or see their therapist or go to their doctor or whoever that their treatment plan relies on. And they're like, I am going to be fine. I'm just going to go to this one doctor and do this one thing. And like tomorrow or next week, I'll be okay. I'll just wake up. But that's just not ever how this works. And I think that like it's so important to remember that like these things take consistency. Like you are the patient who dubbed the name the icky bow of the bending over and standing up. Stephanie Special.
I
And
did.
you did. And people are like, but like I tried to practice that like 1 or 2 days and like it didn't get better. And I still feel like crap when I'm trying to pack up my house or put dishes away. I'm like, you have to practice this in small increments for weeks at a time before you can expect it to like get better or worse. 4 to 6 weeks kind of at an interval. You can add things in and take them out during that 4 to 6 week timeline, but you need at least minimum that timeline for your brain to start to habituate for something. And people do not like to hear that. So I love that you said that.
Yeah. And that's a really hard reality of this neurological disease is that there are grooves that have been created through the vestibular miscommunication, and we're trying to make new grooves, and that takes a long time. And we're impatient. I'm impatient. Certainly would love to just have it be fixed in a day, and but the reality is that it's a long way away from where you were and perhaps might not get to that point ever. However, you can get better. And so that should be the aim. And I think what I would love to add is that you need to find somebody who knows what they're doing and knows this disease process very well, which is exactly who you are, Dr. Madison. It's just to be with somebody who understands the nuance of the disease, the daily needs of someone who is living with this. And so it's not just medication, it's not just dietary changes, perhaps it's not just sleep, it's the treatment pie, and you are a huge part of that pie. So I really feel like that is one of the best things I could recommend is to find somebody who knows vestibular migraine and triple PD or whatever vestibular issue you're dealing with really well, so that you're not misled and you're taught the correct modalities and really supported in a sense of community.
Totally. I love that. Thanks for saying that. I mean, yes, 100%. And not all, I want everyone listening to know that not all vestibular therapists treat vestibular migraine. Most of them treat vestibular neuritis and BPPV. And just because they have the letters NCS after their name, no hate on the neurological clinical specialists. They are phenomenal at what they do, but most of the NCS training for PTs is in stroke and cerebellar disorders and traumatic brain injury and all those things. So don't just like go with the person who has the longest letters after their name. Like call the office, see who's the most experienced, see if they treat vestibular migraine, because maybe they do. There are plenty of people with an NCS who do treat VM, but there are also like most of them don't. So really exactly what you're saying, finding someone who actually treats vestibular migraine on a regular basis, because it is so common. So we do exist. There aren't a lot of us, but we do exist, is really, really important. And head shaking, although I have made you do a lot of head shaking in our clinical time together, should usually not be the very first thing.
Right, right. And again, just to give you praise, I tried a vestibular physical therapist early in my journey, my VM journey, and she was lovely and wonderful, but was not as well versed as you are. And so there was a lot of textbook exercises that I was doing, and I was feeling worse, and I was doing them for too long. I was it was too aggressive. And so when I came to you, you said, we're not going to do that. We're going to do slow and steady. We're going to adapt the exercises to your needs. So what I really loved about your practice is that you do take the individual and cater the exercises to the patient. So what's good for one person is not necessarily the best for another, and vice versa. And so I always felt like it was this personalized physical therapy for me and for what my needs were at the time. And it continually evolved.
So it makes me so happy that you're able to find like people and things and like who love you no matter what. And I think that it's something that's underrated because people love you no matter what you are wearing, what you look, and if they don't, like those aren't real friends. But the people who like are like, yeah, I'll come over and you're in your sweatpants and I'm gonna do your dishes for you and leave, like those are the real ones. Those are the people who are like,
Totally.
okay, I am in your life and like you are so meaningful to me and so loving and like all of the things. So I
Yeah.
don't want you to be like, I can't do that. My friends could never see me. Like it makes me think of this show, Wife Swap, that sometimes was on TV when I
Yeah.
was like home from school. Remember this show?
Totally.
And I would watch it, and there was this wife swap where this woman her husband had never seen her without makeup on since they started dating. And I think that a lot of us kind of like project that, right? It's like I can never go outside without XYZ. I could never not do whatever. But I think so much of this is recognizing like the people who are meant to be in my life do love me, and it doesn't matter if my hair is in a bun or whatever, like my community ultimately is still there for me, and that really matters.
100%. I will also say too is I am an empath. I feel all the feels. If I watch a sad commercial, movie, the whole thing, I feel all the emotions. And so when I say I have support and community and all of that, I do think of the people who are less fortunate and are struggling to find community. And so what I would love to say to that situation is that there are communities that are not necessarily, the person down the street or somebody at your workplace or in your family. The community that you've built online through Vestibular Group Fit is an example of a community. And so it doesn't have to be, your best friend, or it doesn't have to look like something that you see on TV. Community can mean so many different things. And so I just encourage people to seek out those communities that are supportive of whatever they're going through, whether it's vestibular migraine, triple PD, vestibular neuritis, mental health issues. 30% of all vestibular migraine patients have anxiety or depression. And so that's a big chunk of people. It's 1 in 3 patients. So let's have support of those patients in that particular area as well, which of course you do on Vestibular Group Fit. But other sources too, like Vita, there are growing numbers of legit supportive community-based um, uh, treatments and areas where people can feel that sense of community. So I didn't want to sound like, oh, I've got, this and that, and isn't that fantastic? And um, I think it's accessible to most people, and I'm grateful for what you've provided us.
Well, thank you. But I think that you're so right. Like I say, people in vestibular group fit, when I think about it from like a business perspective, like they come for the education, they stay for the community aspect. Like I can only educate you so much before you're like, I get it. I got to eat breakfast. Like I get it, right? Like I got to sleep. Like I got to do things. But it really is the supportive community. And it's not only me. Like, yes, I moderate the group. I do not allow like really long ranty posts, like, sure. But at the end of the day, like I'll give an answer and then everyone else gives an answer. And like that is such an amazing thing because at the end of the day, it's like it's people who are living with the exact same symptoms as you. And like the patients who I have who I see one on one and are also in group or some mix and match of whatever, Or like, I read someone else's post and she has the exact same problems as me, and this person has exact same problems as me, and this person. And I'm like, yeah, everyone is going through a really similar, if not the same thing. And it feels like you're the only one and you're the most complex and just no one can find the answers and like nothing's ever going to get better. But A, that's not true, right? This does ultimately, there are things that you can do to feel better. And also, like, people are going through the same complexities as you. Like, it might be
Yeah.
complex and you might be having a hard time with doctors, but like, people are going through the same thing. And online is such a beautiful thing. And I was just talking to Jill Danishpour from who is the founder of Ruwell, who was on an episode a couple weeks ago. And she is like, honestly, there is nothing. There you go, Ruwell Rollerball. Shout out, sponsored by. I love her so much. She's such a lovely human. That's so funny. If you guys are listening and not watching on YouTube, she just held up the Ruel rollerball, which is one of my favorite things. But the she's like, yeah, there's nothing better than like the migraine community when it comes to chronic illness communities. Like, build a community online, like make an Instagram account about your migraine. And I do have some thoughts on that where some people are like, that becomes like their whole identity, and that's like a whole other separate issue. But if it's part of you, like, I have this thing and this is what I do about it. And part of that is helping yourself via Instagram account because you can relate to people. I am all for that. 100% in. I think that is absolutely great and such a good way to relate to other people. No one said online friends aren't real friends. Like, I'm here
Exactly.
for it. Hmm.
I would say, at the beginning of all this for me, it's been over 12 years now. As I mentioned, have a background in medicine and have always been kind of an A-type personality and very autonomous, very much a doer. And if you give me a problem, I'm going to solve it. And I say those things as a cautionary tale, which is that's really hard when you have something like vestibular migraine, which has no cure and has is so nuanced and so personalized. And so for me, that kind of reality of, wait a minute, I can't fix this. I can't know my way out of this problem, right? I can't study my way out. I can't find the this, that, and the other. It's just not there, the cure. Yes, you can get better, and there's certainly techniques that we need to engage. But I think that reality of I can't do it by myself also pushed me into community, which was all right. This is not going to work unless I bring in some support. And so whether that shows up as friends who you can just call and be real with, um, practitioners like yourself or Dr. Kostelnik, who I'm a patient of, also vestibular psychologist, who she herself has gone through exactly what I have gone through, and yet also helps me with my mental health. And there's just such a buoying up, it's like you put your floaties on for the pool, like I have Madison on my right arm and Emily on my left arm, and I can swim. I can get through the deep end with the support. And it's okay to say, I need help, and not, it doesn't make me less of a person or an A-type personality. I still am that way. However, the reality sets in at some point where you feel like, okay, this is not something that I can just will my way out of. So, yeah, also, like
Absolutely.
two thumbs up for community.
Big two thumbs up for community. I'm a huge fan. I mean, it is so incredibly important. And asking for help is so incredibly hard for people who are type A, do it myself, independent kind of humans. Like, I who has two thumbs, it's me, right? Like, it is so hard to ask for help, and it's a practice. And people are like, well, I couldn't possibly. I'm like, well, ask for help taking out the trash first. Ask for help doing something like very menial around the house. Ask your neighbor to come over and, I don't know, I literally don't know, something, but something that's like no big deal. Hey, can you bring your lawnmower over here so my gardener can use it? Like
Yeah.
something weird and menial at first is like that gets into practice, but we are taught from a very young age that like you don't have a village, you cannot depend on anyone, trust no one but yourself, and figure it
Right.
out all alone. And it's just impossible with vestibular migraine. It is not an option.
100%. And I feel like this has been a real wake up call for me. Just, having chronic illness brings up a lot of um, deep thinking. Wasn't there
Mhm.
like a Saturday Night Live skit like back in the day, probably before your
Probably.
time, Madison, but it was like deep thoughts with such and such. And
Oh
it
my
was
God.
just this kind of funny, like, who
Yes.
was, anywho,
Hannity. Jack
yeah,
Handy.
yes, Jack
Handy.
Hannity. Right. I
Yes.
think it was Martin Short.
Um,
Anywho, it was just this kind of funny, just deep thoughts about everything. And so when you have chronic illness, at least for me, my experience was that there was a lot of existential stuff going on, like, oh, what does
mhm.
this mean? Why did I get this? What kind of person am I now with this? Has that changed? And so the reality of adapting to the loss of who I was and grieving that, and then coming through the other side and realizing I'm not going to deny these emotions. And I'm some of these like key sentences will remind people of ACT therapy, which is acceptance and commitment therapy, which is my thing. I it resonates with me very strongly. I tried CBT, that wasn't really my thing. But through ACT, you're allowed to feel the feels,
Mhm.
but then you kind of accept the emotions as appropriate responses to what's going on. And then you learn to change the behavior after
Mhm.
that. And that felt like doable to me. I'm not great at
Mhm.
it. There's a lot of shame and a lot of guilt. And,
Mhm.
like, can't you just get up and do the things? And you know, I know if it were you, I would say to you, Madison, you have a neurologic disease called vestibular migraine. Your brain is not functioning through normal channels. It would make so much sense to me to say it to you. And yet, it's the hardest to say to myself. And so, a lot of that work Dr. Kostelnik and I are doing is so helpful.
Mhm.
But yeah, just like I said, kind of these bigger questions of, okay, now what do I do with this? How do
Mhm.
I live my life and hold joy and sorrow simultaneously together?
Mhm.
How do I um, find worth in what I'm
Mhm.
doing, even though it doesn't look like what I used to do?
Mhm. And that is such a hard thing to look at, and it's just hard. I have two things. First, the juxtaposition between sadness and joy, and two
Mhm.
things being able to be true at the same time can be really hard. It's like, how could I possibly find joy in this day when I feel so horrible? And
Right.
you said to me once, have the best day available to you. And
Yeah.
I say that all the time now. I usually, if not always, give you credit because it's such a great way of putting it. It's like, what kind of day is available to me right now? And I saw a meme yesterday that was like two pictures of a rain cloud and it's raining. And on the left, it was like, it's raining. I can't go outside. I can't do anything anymore. I'm staying inside forever. I hate everything. The weather is terrible. And the right side, it said, it's raining. And it just said, yup. And like that is acceptance and commitment therapy. Like it's raining, but I don't
Yep.
need to like, yep, I know it's
Yep.
raining, it's all good. But someone in the group fit the other day, had a one-on-one with me and she said, or maybe I saw it on her Instagram, I don't know, I saw it somewhere. Um, and she said, I don't think it's getting your life back, it's getting your life forwards.
Mm,
And I am obsessed with that. Like that is such, I think, great way of saying it, no matter what you're dealing with, whether it's
I
a
love that.
trauma, a chronic illness. I literally don't care what yeah,
I
it's
love that. Yep.
such a good way of thinking about it because ultimately, like there, if you work with me, like I will find a way for you to do anything. It might
Right.
not look perfect. It might not be exactly what you expected 20 years ago, but I'm going to find a way for you to do that thing. I'm going to get you on the plane and you're going to Ireland. Like
Right.
you are going to the
That's
place. We're
right.
going to figure it out. But it's a forward way of thinking. How am I going to do this now? And I think the expectation, especially at first, when you first, it's so overwhelming. There are so many things you need to think about. And I really encourage you to please do it as slowly as humanly possible, which is so hard to do.
Yeah.
But there are ways to do the things forwards
I
that you
love
can.
that. I think that is so powerful and speaks to the grief of it. And also,
Mm-hmm.
this is sort of an ACT ACT
Mm-hmm.
principle of acknowledging that, but also changing behavior in a forward looking motion. I heard a
Mm-hmm.
podcaster say the other day, nobody gets a hand of all aces, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet our society through social media, which I use, no shade to social
Mm-mm.
media, um, books, stories, all of the things that kind of penetrate our daily lives tell us you can do it. If you just do blah blah blah, you'll be this, that, and the other. It's this toxic positivity that I've talked to you about before,
Mm-hmm.
which is so dangerous, especially for people who are already sort of starting off behind the eight ball, if you
Yeah.
will. And so our society doesn't have a lot of room for us at
Mm-hmm.
times. And so we have to sort of make our own space and
Mm-hmm.
finding places where we feel valued and feel um, realized in our own capacity, whatever that capacity is. And if it's just listening to podcasts while you're lying in bed because you're having a bad day, that's still valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And what I wanted to say too was that the self-talk is really hard.
Mm-hmm.
um, Even though we are in this community, we're all kind of experiencing this on our own. And so the community helps me take myself out of my self-talk, which tends to be critical,
Mm-hmm.
and allows me to hear the reality of the situation, which is, for example, I think I had my last appointment with Dr. Kostelnik. We were working on my daughter's graduation from college, and there were, multiple events in a row that I really, really wanted to go to. This is a big pivotal moment for her life. Super happy for her, and I didn't want to miss it. But I knew I had to pace myself. I knew I had to use techniques like meditation, mindfulness, breathing, rescue meds if I needed them, all of the pieces of the pie to get through this period of time. And I did it. And I saw Dr. Kostelnik afterwards, and she said, "So tell me about your week." And I ran through kind of what I did. And she paused and said, "Did you just hear what you said? You did all of these things. You did it." And I had not been able to see that. Like, as I was explaining it to her, I think we have a hard time seeing what our
Mm-hmm.
successes are. I certainly focus on the negatives and the things that I
Mm-hmm.
can't do.
Mm-hmm.
So again, using community again because it's so important, but somebody like that, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's a healthcare professional or a friend or a neighbor or the person at the grocery store says, "You did a great job," or "I
Mm-hmm.
can't believe you just did that." Now, is that my norm? Absolutely not. I still struggle daily. I still have dizziness daily. It's not to say that I went from A to B and all's well with the world in
Mm-hmm.
my health life. It's more about that mind shift and shape shifting, if you will, of the
Mm-hmm.
mindset about what's going on, and then accepting it and changing some behaviors so that you can live more comfortably in this body of chronic illness.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I love all of what you just said. It's so true about the mindset shift, but also not recognizing it because even if you have been living with vestibular migraine for 12, 15, 30 years, you name it, like people still tend to compare themselves to the prior to vestibular migraine version of themselves. So I keep giving this example, but it's exactly what you just said of someone who said like couldn't get off the couch 10 weeks ago, 6 months, probably 6 months ago now, literally was like, I am housebound, walked
Yeah.
a mile and a half to her daughter's soccer game carrying an easy up and was like, but I didn't do it perfectly. I felt a little
Yeah.
bit weird when I got there. And I'm like, did
Yeah.
you just hear yourself? Like I
Yeah.
went to my daughter's graduation, I went to the gala, I went to and I'm sure that's exactly what you did, but I missed this one thing, or I had a dropping sensation at graduation or something like that. And the focus on that one thing that went wrong, like I think Dr. Emily would probably call it generalizing or something like there's a therapeutic term for it, but
Yes.
is what everyone does.
Yes. Yes. 100%. And I still have to work on that. I mean, we're talking
Mm-hmm.
years and years of trying to override these grooves that have been made in my brain as far
Mm-hmm.
as how I think about things and my worth, my self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for example, one of the things that we needed to do was get downtown. We live right outside of DC for some of the events, and my husband needed to take a different car, and so I didn't want to drive because I still struggle driving occasionally, and I needed to take that pressure off me so that I could go to the event. So my first thought was, really, you can't just get in the car and drive everybody, meaning my parents and my son, et cetera, to the event. Like, it's not that big of a deal. Just get in the car. That's what I would have told myself and still do occasionally, which is very self-deprecating and very critical.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband said to me, and he said this many times, like, what's the big deal? Who cares if you drive? You're not getting like a gold star when you pull up driving the car. Nobody cares.
Uh-huh.
And so it's not to belittle what I was feeling. It was just a reality check of like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you know what? If we take an Uber, it's fine. It's
It's fine.
okay. It's okay. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not less of a mom. I'm not less of a partner. I'm not less of anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, just that kind of realization and understanding is really helpful. But it took a long time for me.
Yeah. And that is hard. I mean, it's hard. And ultimately, the not ironic or funny part about it, but like the thought process through it is like if you didn't have vestibular migraine and you're like, I just like don't feel like driving today, you'd be like, yeah, I'm gonna take an Uber. It's no big deal.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
this like double standard gets set after vestibular migraine comes into the picture, and it's like, but I have to prove myself that I can do everything.
100%. And I'm not sure why that is, as far as like
Yeah.
our, just our mental health, but I couldn't agree more because, like I said at the beginning, everything that you can't do seems amplified. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's just it can snowball where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I can't even make dinner, and now I can't go to work, and I can't do this and that. And so, yeah, again, just advocating so significantly and strongly for people to recognize that they can't do that on their own sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
and reaching out for help, whether it's in the form of therapy or friendship or communities like Vestibular Group Fit, to find that support and that reality check of like,
Mm-hmm.
whoa, hold on a second. Yeah.
Totally, totally. One thing I want to say about online groups is that if you find one, please trust your gut because there
Yes.
are a lot out there that are like all negative, all I never get better, all this is the like, this is my life is over forever. And there are no, or like maybe 10% positive things. And if it is any less than, I'd say 30% positive, which when you were in like the trenches of this,
Yeah.
is so hard to read someone else's positive story. And we've had a lot of conversations about this where it's like,
Yes.
I sometimes wish I could read something negative to know that I'm not alone. But if it
Yes.
is all that, we really want to kind of avoid that because ultimately there are therapies, there are things to do to where you can be in a more manageable spot and go to your daughter's graduation. Like that is ultimately an option and the place you will get with the right set of tools. You have to figure out what those things are, all the things, but also your brain cannot be told all day, every day, this doesn't get better. Because
That's
if
right.
that is the mindset, then that is a self-fulfilling prophecy ultimately, which is not fun to hear, but
Yeah.
it is the truth.
And I would say, I would add to that that it changes. So in other words, this is not a clear path
Mm-hmm.
from a mental health standpoint either. So for example, there are days where I feel like I am good. Like this
Mm-hmm.
is, I am, look what I just did. And I'm feeling decent and I haven't used a rescue med, blah, 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 whatever the conditions
Mm-hmm.
are, whatever is a, quote unquote good day for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are days where you feel like you've just taken 10 steps back and you
Mm-hmm.
think, hold on a second. I did all the things. I've taken all my supplements. I've meditated. I've exercised because I always
Proud of
exercised.
you.
Um, and yet, vestibular migraine and triple PD can still show up. And so it's not about what you've not done or done.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it just happens.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what I would say to that is on those days, it is harder to listen to the success stories and the Wednesday wins,
Mm-hmm.
which I love. I love Wednesday
But it's
wins.
hard.
But it's, I mean, you just get this like sense of like, oh, I just wish I could have
Mm-hmm.
done fill in the blank. And it's not to say that you can never do that, but
Mm-hmm.
I do think that on those hard days, it is hard to hear
Totally.
um, the positives, and that's just human nature.
Totally.
It's not. I don't think it's unique to vestibular
Mm-hmm.
migraine.
Yeah, absolutely. It is hard. It's hard to hear and it's also hard to understand. Like, you can't ask why or what you did wrong. You just have to
Yeah,
use the toolkit that you have and then try something new or take something out or whatever. Because at the end of the day, like just like you said, you can do all the right things. Exercise, meditate, take your supplements, take your medication. I slept well last night. I did whatever and it can still happen. And I
yeah,
find that the people who do the best say, I don't ask why this happened. I just take my meds, I do my supplement routine, I do my gamma core, I do my I do my whatever it is,
yeah,
and I move forward. Because
yeah.
sitting in that, like, why did this happen? What did I do wrong? Is such a negative spiral a lot of the times. It can be so hard.
Absolutely.
So hard. Um, how at the end of like, not, I guess you're never really, that's a terrible way to put this. How do you like to measure progress? Like from where you were on day one, 12 years ago to
Yeah,
now,
yeah,
what has that looked like from like a progress perspective of like how you measured that? Not necessarily like I was great and now I'm not, whatever. You know what I'm
sure,
saying?
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I've tried a lot of different techniques. I've tried journaling, which I'm not very good at. Um, but in that same vein, I often will either have someone remind me because I'm not a good reminder of to
Mm-hmm.
myself of
Yeah.
what I have done.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that's why, like we've been saying, finding healthcare practitioners that are very familiar with vestibular migraine.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, a lot of those providers are online, so hopefully they're accessible to most people. Those people intimately know how hard it is and how hard this chronic illness can be, and yet they are someone who can hopefully, if they're really good, like yourself, can be a mirror to you, which is to say, like, remember when we started and you couldn't do this and that, and remember you were in bed for 5 days in a row, and I'm not hearing you say that anymore. So perhaps, things have moved forward in a certain trajectory. So for me, I think measuring progress has been mostly from input from other people and realizing that I'm not very good at doing that for myself. And so I do need that. Hopefully, I'm not too annoying to my friends and family by saying, like, tell me what tell me this fantastic thing I've done. Um, but that's a barometer that I use. I would also say that in the trial and error of so many techniques, whether it's for my mental health, or supplementation or functional medicine, I have tried so many things, and I have my go-to, top five things that really work for me as far as mindset, um, acute attack treatments, and that kind of thing. And the only way to get there, unfortunately, is the trial and error, which again is so exhausting and so hard. And yet we have to, we owe it to ourselves to try and find the things that work best for us. And because this is so personal and nuanced, what works for me is not necessarily going to work for the next person and vice versa. So interestingly, I also had a lot of guilt and shame about that, which was like, if you said to me, like, why don't you try journaling? Or, and lots of people have suggested that. And then I was like, I can't do it. I suck at journaling. Like, what's wrong with me? Um, and again, that's just my personality. And that's a whole other like topic. But the point being is that there are things that can be individualized to you, the patient, that will show you progress, show you how well you've been doing. And so, yeah, I think just doing a deep dive into vestibular group fit is also a great way to do that, because you can sort of track how you're doing. So, in other words, if you're taking classes, you're taking a strength conditioning class with Kelsey, or you're doing a full body with Dr. Madison. I could not have done those 10 years ago. Like I just could, there was no way I could do it. And I'm doing them now. And so that slow progress, right? This is not a, fairy dust sprinkled on your head and big transformation. It's slow, it's super slow. And I also think that's where it gets hard to see the progress. So yeah, I don't know if I answered that
You
question very
did. That was great. That was perfect. Honestly, I couldn't have said it better myself. But I love at the end the slow part because everyone
well. Yes.
asks me, how do I get this done tomorrow? How
Yeah.
do I be 100% tomorrow morning when I wake up? And whenever I start seeing patients, I don't think you did this, but most people, their goal is, actually, I know for a fact you didn't do this. Most people's goal, when I say, what would this look like to be successful for you? Most people say, I just want to wake up in the morning and not be dizzy anymore.
Mm,
And I hear you and I feel that. Like I get it from my core. Like I understand because it is awful.
yeah.
At the exact same time, if that is your only goal, you're ultimately not going to feel successful short term and long term. Because
Yeah.
getting to that goal means you need to feel proud that you did something else. And if you feel proud that you walked around the block, you need to feel proud that you sat in your car and
Yeah.
didn't maybe have a panic attack. You need to feel proud that you can cook dinner for yourself or bend over and get something off the floor. Like these smaller goals on the way to that. And some people hit that ultimate goal and some people ultimately don't. And
Mhm.
either way is okay. Ultimately, getting you to a place where you can function, go to your kid's graduation, fly to other countries, travel to see your family, do literally whatever it is you want to do, walk around the block. I don't care what it is. Skydive for all I care. I will help you figure out how to do that thing. But if the only goal you have is how do I get better tomorrow and just wake up and not be dizzy, I will be not happy to tell you, but also
Yeah.
need to tell you that that is not the goal to aim for. And I'm not telling
100%.
you to not shoot for the stars, like do all the things,
Yeah.
But if that's what your brain focuses on, your brain is going to ultimately focus on being more dizzy, which is such a hard thing. And that's why I love ACT with Dr. Emily.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I really struggled with that, though. I definitely wanted it to be like, let's
Mm-hmm.
just snap our fingers and just give me this medication and it'll go away. And then I can resume our regularly
Mm-hmm.
scheduled programming. And that didn't happen. And I know
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to happen. And so this kind of reinventing of me, um, takes time and that slowness. But I mean, as you were talking, I was thinking of one of our first appointments many years ago now,
Mm-hmm.
and I was having trouble getting the dishes out of the dishwasher.
Mm-hmm.
And you created a plan for me on how to do that. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it took weeks.
It
And
did.
to the average person, you would think, oh my gosh, that's so basic or not a big deal. It was a huge deal. And do I get the dishes out of the dishwasher now
Mm-hmm.
without too much issue? Absolutely. So it can get better. It does not go away,
Mm-hmm.
but it can get better. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you address certain things, it allows, so again, I'm going to borrow this from somebody I heard on a podcast,
Mm-hmm.
but something to the effect of, when you reduce the pain, whether that's physical pain from migraine or mental health pain,
Mm-hmm.
whatever pain there is, if you can reduce the pain, the joy gets in faster, or joy can penetrate a little bit easier. So
Mm-hmm.
if you have this wall up of pain and disease, the joy is just, it's like a force field, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you can address the medical stuff and the mental health portion of that, you will be able to feel joy more fully and more easily
Mm-hmm.
on a daily basis. So yeah, just again, holding those two things simultaneously.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a beautiful way to end. Thank you.
You're
So well
welcome.
said. So well said.
Well, I mean, I can't advocate enough for vestibular group fit. I think it is genius. It is so beautifully done and with such grace and kindness towards the patient. And I can say that because I am a patient and I'm a member of vestibular group fit.
You are
It's
indeed.
so beautifully
Thank you.
crafted and addresses pretty much everything I mean, it's all in this one location. And so I'm just so grateful for you.
I'm grateful for you. And thank you for being here today. And if you want to join group, is a code this month. It's MHAM30 for 30% off, which I haven't said on the podcast yet. So here you go. There you go.
Highly
Thank you so much
recommend.
for thank you so much for being here. I
Thanks for
appreciate
having
it.
me.